guys, what's up? Thanks for tuning back into the channel, much appreciated. And I'm on the road heading down to Lake Pickwick for our first Bassmaster Open starting Thursday. Gonna be getting down there and I'll get short practice, 2.5 days of practice, and I'm gonna probably do a video later today on the my pre-tournament practice strategy, and then every day of the practice I'll give you guys an update on how it's going and try to cover everything in the tournament. So stay tuned for that, much appreciated. Man, and one of the reasons that I'm getting a short practice for a lot of these tournaments this year is it's just so hard to leave Elijah. I mean, he's 3.5 years old, and this morning he did not want me to go. I mean, it is so hard to leave that little guy, when he's sitting there just crying that he didn't want me to leave, and then I have to, watch him out the window as I pull away. Man, you guys that have kids know how hard that is, and man, that's the worst part about it, going to these tournaments anymore. Just dread that. But anyway, on today's trip down there, I sort of want to give you guys a tip and sort of some advice and have a discussion on one of the things that's starting around the country right now. Some parts of the country of it's in full swing, and it's going to be over the next probably 3 or 4 weeks around most part of the country. And that is have a discussion on the shad spawn. And I'm going to tell you guys why it's a waste of time to chase the shad spawn. And first of all, if you guys have followed tournament fishing much, excuse me, you hear a lot about in April and May and into the June about pros and the shad spawn. Oh, I got on a shad spawn bite and I caught them and this and that. And you never used to hear about this before. It was sort of like bed fishing back 30 years ago. Nobody bed fished back then. They just didn't do it. But there's been a trend over the past really 5-10 years, something like that. You hear about these guys capitalizing on the shad spawn. And I think there's a big mystery surrounding this, because here's my opinion of it. I think that you hear a lot about this and you read a lot about this on the pro tournaments, but in reality, very few people have experienced it. And I think there's an intimidation factor that goes on out there with anglers, that they think they're missing out on something by not knowing what the deal is with this shad spawn deal. But I'm here to tell you guys right now, for the most part, you're wasting your time putting the energy into and trying to chase the shad spawn. And I'm going to explain why that is. First of all, shad will spawn, like I said, it depends on the geographical location of the country that you're in, but most of the time it's a post-spawn deal. After those bass start spawning, after that water temperature starts rising up, 70 degrees or more, that's when a lot of the threadfin shad will spawn. And they spawn depending upon the type of cover that's in your lake. They like to spawn around riprap, on bank grass edges, around dock corners. They spawn around a lot of different type of targets and cover that you have, just depending upon what's unique to the lake that you have. And most of the time, when you notice shad spawning, all you're noticing is like a little pod of activity next to the bank or next to an object, where you see some shad flickering on the surface, and they're spawning shad over there when they do that. But here's the deal: these shad, most of the time, they spawn right at daylight and just shortly after. Most of the tournaments that we have, you're normally taking off at 7 o'clock in a lot of these tournaments, or 6:30 or 7. And later in the spring, it's been daylight for an hour and a half or so, hour and a half. And for the most part, by the time that you get out on the lake to even start looking for a shad spawn, it's sort of tailing off by then, unless you get out at daylight. So say, for example, you get out and practice, and you're out there at the crack of dawn, and you're fishing down a bank, and you see some shad spawning on a riprap, and you throw over there a spinnerbait, and you catch a couple big ones. And in the tournament, you're boat 155, and you don't get out of there until 7:30 in the morning. And by the time you run over to your riprap, the shad are all done spawning and there's nothing over there. that is what happens more than not when you find shad spawning. Another thing about this is you can't go out and practice or hunt shad spawns. It's just like they're too random. It's just like, if everybody, say for example, everybody's in practice is saying, oh, I got a really good shad spawn bite going on. You cannot formulate a game plan around looking for shad spawn areas, because they spawn on such random areas. It's impossible to pattern these things. Aside from, if you've seen shad spawning on say, some riprap stretches between boat docks, yeah, you might be able to run that a little bit, but you don't have much of a window to figure that out. So the point of what I'm talking about, why I think, when you chasing the shad spawn is a waste of your time, is that the time that you spend actually looking for shad spawn, which is random, and sometimes you never find it, you could be doing other things. You could be looking for other ways to catch fish and develop a pattern. Now, if you happen to run across, say you're fishing down a row of docks, or you're fishing down a row of bank grass or whatever, and you happen, first thing in the morning, and you happen to notice some shad spawning, sure, take advantage of it. I'm not saying that you shouldn't, but the point of my YouTube video here is that don't waste your time just running down the lake looking for it, because it's like chasing a needle in a haystack for the most part. And another thing I want to say with that is, don't feel like you're missing out. Don't be intimidated. Don't feel like you're lacking somehow in skills of an angler if you don't get on this shad spawn bite, if you don't find it, or if you don't figure it out. Because I'm telling you guys right now, it's an extremely random thing. It's an extremely fragile deal. It's extremely unreliable. In my opinion, it's one of the most overrated elements in fishing that you ever run across. And for me, I never go out there looking for a shad spawn bite. If I find it, great, I'll take advantage of it, but I never waste time chasing down looking for spawning shad. I never do that. A couple different tips is if you do get on an area that's got some shad spawning on it, as far as how to take advantage of it. In my opinion, there's the two number one presentations for a shad spawn bite. And a lot of times, if those bass are up there eating those spawning shad, they'll bite anything that you're throwing there. But the two baits that I have done the best on when I find that situation is a small spinnerbait, like a small 1/4 ounce spinnerbait, some type of shad pattern with like a number 3, number 4 willow leaf blade, fairly compact spinnerbait. Throwing it right up on there in the bank and just sort of shaking it just under the surface. And the second bait, it would be a chugger, some type of a pop R, Megabass Pop Max, some type of a shad pattern chugger. Works really good. The days that I've had great shad spawn bite, or the days that I have capitalized on that, have been when I got out there in the morning and I'm looking for a May topwater bite on lakes where the bass are shallow. And it can be on rocky banks, it can be on riprap, it can be around docks, whatever. Low light conditions with a popper. I mean, those are the times that I have really had good days fishing the shad spawn deal. But I can count so many times. I remember we were fishing a Bassmaster tournament at Lake Norman several years ago, and I had 3 or 4 riprap stretches. Like, these were like 75-yard stretches of riprap between docks that these shad were spawning on. And there were not only the shad were spawning on, but there was a few bass, late spawners on this bank. And in practice, it was just stupid. I could get out there first thing in the morning, and I had the hooks cut off my chugger, and I had big ones just blowing it out of the water right and left on those banks where the shad were spawning. First day of the tournament, I run in there. Of course, we get out an hour later than what I've been out, and I get out there and there's nothing. It's like no action, no shad spawning, no bites on the chugger, that type of a thing. And I wound up in that tournament, I had to catch them, completely different. My shad spawn bite was gone, and I expected fully in that tournament. This was before I had a lot of experience with it. I thought I was going to catch my whole bag the first 20 minutes in the morning on that shad spawn bite. So that's the reality of fishing the shad spawn more than not that situation I just described there. But my advice on the thing, guys, Just don't get sucked into it. Don't get sucked into reading about this shad spawn deal and you've never had success about it and you think you're missing out. You're not missing out. You're going to do just as good if you don't even bother with even thinking about shad spawn. Take advantage of it if you do come upon it, but spend the rest of your time, just fishing and looking for fish that are a lot more predictable and, can be targeted a little bit more regularly. So anyway, that's today's tip, guys. Much appreciated. Man, just one last thing. If you guys like these videos I'm putting out, please hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't. Really appreciate it. It really makes it, it motivates me to want to continue doing these videos, and that's really important to those of us who are taking the time that it takes to put all these videos together and put them up on YouTube. If we could get that little help from you guys. So I'll keep you all updated this week down at Pickwick, the Bassmaster Open. Like I said, Pickwick, I've got a love-hate relationship with this place. I don't like fishing this lake at all. There's something about Pickwick that I don't like being here. I don't like fishing it. But what the weird thing is about it, every time I go to Pickwick, I usually do good. I usually wind up making a decent check every time I here. But for some reason, I just don't really care for fishing it. It's sort of odd. You guys know what I'm talking about. You got lakes that are your favorites and ones that are not. But we'll see how it goes this week, and we'll check in later. See you.